Okay, what we're going to do today then is review some of the things we covered last week. I won't get into all the details of it, but be able to just show you the steps of creating the things that we need to create. Starting with the drive, adding a second drive to our server, and then creating a share, and then creating all the files that we need to do work with. Very, very basic folder structure to play with. Then we'll use our Windows 7 client to log in and test those rights and make sure that they're working. We also want to map a drive letter to make it easier for the people to access to it. We'll be looking at other ways of mapping drive letters to it, which are much simpler next week when we get into group policy objects. Right now we're going to manually do it though. So with that, we're going to start with our Windows Server 2012. And I'm going to power it on. I'm going to make it full screen by doing Control-Alt-Enter. This machine should be quite a bit faster. I'm not sure why this is so slow right now. I probably might get ahead of you. Please stop me along the way though if you're trying to follow and take notes especially. Please let me know. Just raise your hand and say, hey, just take a minute for me to catch up. I'm going to sign in, so I'm going to hit Control-Alt-Insert to log in, and my administrator password is our special password, capital PA $W0RD. And I have my server at this point. This is what we built before. The base configuration is there. We have Active Directory. Let me just double check to make sure that I have my users and organizational units. I may have gone back too far on my snapshots, and I think I did. Okay, so just making sure that I do have all my users here. Organizational Madison, Robert, under sales, Joshua. So I'm looking good for there. Good. Okay. Since we're working with files and file access, last week we did look into creating a second drive. Let me do full screen again, Control-Alt-Enter. If I go to File Manager at this point, I only have a single drive, and this is allocated for my operating system. And I don't want to be, typically you do not want to be mixing and matching your operating system with data. Yes, there's NTFS permissions and security, but it's really nice if people had access to a physical separate drive for their data than trying to mixing and matching data with operating system. There's all kinds of other reasons for it too, even for backup or replacing drives. It's just kind of nice keeping it separate. So to add a second drive, just like in the real world, we can hot plug a new drive into a server, and we're going to add a new drive to this virtual machine while it's running. And most of you have done this already, unless you went back to a snapshot and kind of reviewing the same steps, kind of review. It's up to you. But I'm going to VM. So this is outside of the virtual machine. So I'll be acting on the virtual machine with VMware Workstation. I go to VM Settings, and it gives me here's my current settings, my hardware, and then the bottom of the Add button. So way in the bottom of the Add button. Okay, so on the bottom you have the Add, and I click Add, and I want to add a new hard disk to this. And I just click Next, and then all of these are going to be defaults from here on out. So I click Next, create a new virtual disk. I don't want to use an existing virtual disk. I don't want to use a physical disk. I want to create a new virtual disk. They recommend 60 gig. That's crazy for a server, but we don't. That's terribly small. You can't put much data on a 60 gig drive. This is just for practicing though. We're putting a couple files and folders. That's plenty. It doesn't really matter how big this makes it because we're not allocating all the space right now anyway. It's just going to be really, really tiny and let's grow up to that point. So these are all the defaults. They're fine for what we're trying to do in class. It's going to want to make a new file. Your last number is going to be different, but the first part should be your server name, and then behind it it's just going to put a number. When I'm all done, I click Finish, and then now I have a new hard drive installed on this computer. I can see that, not through here because it hasn't been initialized yet. So I need to go to Disk Manager and work with that physical disk that I just inserted. There's a couple ways of getting there. It is actually right off the Start menu. If you right click on the Start menu, you have Disk Management tool up here now. That's brand new in Windows 8 or maybe even 8.1 and Server 2012. You always had to access disk management through computer management. You couldn't get to it directly before. So like I was saying, you could go directly to disk management now. In previous versions of Windows, you had to go through computer management. There was no direct access to disk management before. So it's nice to have that. So I go to disk management. I'm going to maximize the screen just to see everything that's on it. And let's get this out of the way. Go out of the way. Okay, put you up there. Right now it's a little down. It's saying it's offline. But even one step before putting it online is right-clicking on it. I'm sorry, I have to put it online and then I have to initialize it. Sorry. So I have to put it online first, and then it's not initialized. So I have to right-click again. Now the first step of being offline, that's a group policy setting. That's something that's done on the server level. We're going to talk about group policies next week, so that somebody just can't throw a drive into your server, boot to it, or it could be auto run an application or something like that, and it doesn't want to, I don't know, install something. So this next step though of initializing a disk, you have to do for all disks. You buy a new disk at the store and put it in your computer at home, you have to initialize it first. So there's nothing different for this than any other disk. So I initialize the disk, and it asks me if I want MBR or GBT. GBT is just for really large files. We're not working with anything large. Microsoft still recommends MBR unless you need it, unless it's required for file sizes, but what we're doing is perfectly fine with MBR. So I go ahead and click OK. And now it's online, it's ready, but I still don't have a drive here. So it's an unformatted, unpartitioned volume at this point, or drive. I need to create volumes on here. Often when we think of drives, we think of a full physical drive. They're really not. A drive letter is not a drive letter, it's a volume letter. You can even sort of see up here on this physical disk 0, I have two partitions. One of them is reserved, we can't really see it, but the second one does have a drive letter. Well, it's not the letter to the drive, it's a letter to this volume. So I could put multiple partitions on here. I'm not going to make it one big partition. And I right click, it's a new simple volume. I'm going to make it the full size of the disk. It's going to send the letter E. I'm actually going to bump that to F for right now because I'm going to change all the drive letters later on. And then I click next. NTFS is what I want it to be. Leave the default allocation unit size. It'll figure out the best block size for you. Don't change that unless you have a real specific need to. But I will change the volume name instead of new volume. That's not a very exciting volume name. So I'm going to make it data. And so now it's going to format, and it's healthy and ready to go. So I have a data volume. Now this is where I'm going to start changing drive letters. I ultimately want I prefer on my servers to have my data volume be my D drive. So C is for my operating system and D is for my data. I was not allowed to choose that during the installation because my CD-ROM drive is already a D drive. So now I have to do this kind of swapping stuff around. My data is going to be my D drive, and my CD-ROM drive is going to be the next available drive letter then, which would be E. If I had done the defaults on my data, it would have chosen E, and then I couldn't put my CD-ROM drive there and kind of bounce around a couple more times. So I just kind of saved a step by me changing to F. So I'm going to change my, let's see, yeah, CD-ROM. I'm going to change the drive letter. So I right-click on the CD-ROM, change the drive letter to change to E. It does give me a warning saying if things are mapped directly to that former D drive, you're not going to find it. It doesn't remap anything. It's supposed to change the drive letter E. Sometimes it doesn't refresh properly, so you might have to do the little refresh button up on top. And If it doesn't refresh, later on when I go to change this to D, it's going to say D is not available. So most of the time it refreshes, sometimes it doesn't. I'm right-clicking in my F drive then. I'm going to change its drive letter and change it to D. It also tells me, hey, be careful because some programs might rely on that specific drive letter. I know I don't have to worry about it in that case because it's an empty drive. And for whatever reason, mine's not refreshing well today. There we go. So now I have my D drive and my E drive the way that I want them to be. So I'm done with disk management, so I can close it. I go to this computer, or my computer file manager, and now I can see that I have my two different drives there, my C drive and my D drive. So we did things a little bit differently last week. As far as creating shares, we created files and we made shares for each of those files. It's really good practice. That's not what we're going to be doing for the final. And in many cases, that's not how it's done in industry either, having lots and lots of shares. It's really nice to consolidate them under a single share and then giving people access to things they want. There are definitely disadvantages to it. We're not going to take a ton of time getting into all the disadvantages, pros and cons. This is just the way that we decided to do it. But knowing that there are other ways of doing it as well. So what we want to do in this example is on the data volume itself, we want to share it. Actually, yeah, we'll start with this because there's another thing we have to do too. But so we'll just share the data drive to begin with. So I'm going to go to Properties. I'm going to right-click on my data volume and go to Properties, and then go to Sharing. And I never want to use the simple sharing. I always want to use the advanced sharing. Even on home, on a regular computer, just use advanced sharing. It's just actually easier, I find, more straightforward. So I want to share this drive, the entire drive. And it thinks it's a folder, so I'm going to click on Share This as a folder. And whenever you create a share, it's going to default the share name to your folder name. Well, in this case, the D drive is my directory or my folder, and that's what it wants to put on there. I don't want to share it as D because D could mean anything. I like sharing it with the volume name, and so I'll put data on there. If this was a specific department, it's data. I would put that. I would put, HR or HR data. If this were people's home directories, which we really don't get into this class, but I'd make the shared name home. It could be, whatever specific thing you want or as general as you want. The next really important step is right here, and it's not obvious because you just click share, I put the name on it, and then there's just the click OK. People will not be able to do what they need to do right now this way. You have to change the permissions. And what's even recommended right now by Microsoft still is under everyone is that you give them full control. And there's some debate on how you want to do that, of who can have what, but this is generally what's recommended. This is the window from the outside to the server, and instead of messing with controlling or limiting rights, this is only limits rights. If I'm limiting rights on the outside as the share of the window, it just messes everything up the inside. It's like I'm sure I gave them full rights, but if the window is not big enough, it only allows some rights to come back through. And it's just, you know what? Open the window, we'll secure it once you get in. So is the idea behind that. So everyone should have full control, and I click OK and OK and close. Let's record this as well. This is just a base Windows 7 computer. It's not join the domain. Here's just a quick review of joining the domain. I have to change my DNS server first before I can join gopa.com. It has to know where gopa.com is. So I'm going to go to my network settings, open Network and Sharing Center. And then I'm going to click on my local area network connection. You can also choose change adapter settings. There's a couple ways of getting to this screen. But once I'm here, I'm going to click on Properties. And it's my DNS that I need to change from my TCP/IP version 4 settings. So I'll click on Properties. And I'm going to still have the IP address assigned automatically. I don't need to statically assign that. That would just be a mess trying to remember all those for all the computers. But I do need to have my DNS. My Windows Server becomes my DNS in my environment, and the numlock is off. 192.168.118.11 should be your Windows Server, and that's what should be your DNS then to look for first. After that, it'll go out to the school's network to find other names for the resolution. I click OK, and I click Close, and I click Close. So that should take care of the DNS part. Now I can join the domain by clicking Start, right-clicking on Computer, and go to Properties. Right now, this is part of the work group. By the way, you probably already have yours joined to the domain, so this is not something that you need to do. That's just a quick review as long as I had to do it anyway. Click Change Settings. And I want to rename the computer or to join a domain. I click Change over here. So I click the Change button. And now I'm going to change the domain, from work group to domain, and I'm going to choose gopa.com. This is a good time to make sure that your computer is named something wisely. Client computers tend to name, especially Windows 7, do some really weird Win7 bunch of extra characters. It's hard to change the computer name after you join the domain, so it does give you the chance to do it all on the same screen. If I had multiple Windows 7 clients, I'd name them Win7.2, Win7.3, Win7.4, Win7.5. This is my first one still, so I'm going to click OK. I need the administrator account to grant me the access to the domain. Not anybody can just walk up and join the domain. And if my settings are all correct and my servers are all up, I should be welcome to the domain. Make sure that you do not already have a Windows 7.1 in your domain. Prior to joining a second one, it's not going to work. It's going to fail. It says there's already a computer with that name, so you'd have to rename this machine to be able to join the domain then. So now that I've joined the domain, I'm going to log on as not student, which is a local account, but a network account, a domain account, and I'm just going to choose Robert. Every time you log as a new user, whether it's local or domain, it creates a new profile. We're using Windows 7 for these classes because Windows 7 creates profiles way faster than Windows 8. Windows 8 feels like 5 minutes it takes to create a profile, and every user we're going to log in, we're not going to wait that long. For working with the user rights, file access rights, it doesn't matter what client you have. We could be running XP clients. You get to see the same rights either way. So I'm just working with something a little bit faster. Okay, so now I'm Robert. I logged in. Let me see if I can see that share. So if I click on Windows Explorer, I can go to Network. And it should prompt me the first time, and now most of you have already been in here, just once for the computer. It's not per user. This is once for the computer. Do you want to enable network discovery and whatever? So yeah, you want to turn it on. You can still access things. This is above my authorization level, so I still need to enter my N administrator account to allow me to do this. You can still access servers and network resources without the sharing. The sharing just makes it a little bit easier to find things. Over time, it will eventually pop up. I can hit refresh a bunch of times, and eventually it'll come up. To sort of speed things along, when you log out and log back in, it refreshes all your connections. So I'm going to do that because I actually find it faster sometimes to just log off. Don't have to shut down, but just log off. And that should reset all your settings. Later on, even next week when we talk about group policy objects, there's ways of forcing it, and there's certain timing, but sometimes just by restarting or logging off, it's kind of just there for you. So I click under network, and now I have my server 2012 server because it's shared with me. I can double click on it, and I can see I have 3 shares with it. These are shares that I really don't have access to, or I shouldn't be doing a whole lot with. But what I can do is my data drive. And so now I'm Robert, just a normal everyday user, and I go to my data drive. And if you can see this, let's say I'm Robert, I want to make a new file. I can give, Robert can make another new file, a folder, and I can delete things on there. I can make one called accounting. And it's like, I'm not part of accounting, I'm part of the executive office, but I can delete the accounting folder, and it's just like, wait a second. I created this folder, and I have this drive, and Robert's logged in, and Robert can do anything. And that's just not a good idea. Where that comes from is on the server itself, so I'm going to flip back to the server. I don't need users and computers, but I do need this PC or the file manager. And right at the root of the drive itself, if I right click on here and go to properties, right click and then properties and security, you're gonna see some rights here. Everyone, don't touch everyone, just leave everyone alone. There's some things that are required. There's some special permissions we're gonna leave, but the things that's causing Robert to be able to do everything is really this users part. And this users can read files here, and there's under the special permissions also they can create some stuff or whatever. We want to get rid of that. We don't want users. Don't get mixed up with everyone and users. They're very similar, and they actually apply the same way as for everything that we're working with in class. Everyone doesn't have to be logged in. Users have to be logged in, and then once they're logged in, they have the rights. But in our world, they're both the same. We don't want all the users to be able to do everything. So we just edit it, click on users, and then click remove users. We're going to click OK, and then OK. Now rights should happen right away, because every time that you try to do something, it looks at the file, the NTFS file system permissions. So if I try to create a new folder, it tells me that I can't, which is good. You don't want them to. Flipping back to my server, if I put a directory out here, a new folder called account for accounting or whatever I'm going to be putting out there. So I'm the administrator, I can do this. If I'm Robert on a Windows 7 client, I can see that. If I double click on it though, it says I don't have permission to it. And so you don't want, a normal user to be able to go up to a department and click delete and then delete an entire department. So we're going to work with the security then. So that's where we're at so far. Okay, so now what we're going to do next is from the server, we are going to create department directories for each of our departments. I already created accounting just as an example. I'm going to create a new folder for the executive department or the executive office. I have sales, so a new folder for sales. I'm going to make a new one for operations, maybe abbreviated for ops. I have accounting, new folder, IS, and another new folder for HR. So I think I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have all those rights. So I have all those directories. So now I want to apply the rights. So right now, no one can do anything. Just because I create an executive folder doesn't mean that Robert, who's an executive, can access it. So we need to be able to give these permissions at the NTFS file system level. So these are not share permissions, these are NTFS file permissions. So I do that by clicking on each of these departments. So if I want to click on accounting, and I go to right click on accounting, click on properties, I go to security, and right now this is my current list. And I want to be able to put who I want to be able to access the accounting directory in this list. This is the access control list. This is the who can do what. So if I edit this list, I want to add the accounting group. And I have a group called accounting users, or just accounting, or whatever you named your group. I named mine accounting users just to make it clear that that's what that group is for. And I click OK. And now what rights do I want? I want to give them, in addition to read rights, I also want to give them the ability to modify anything in that directory. And when I click modify, it will also, oops, I missed modify. Modify, it will also automatically give them the write rights. So they can read files, they can write files, and they can modify files. And those are the things that you want them to do. You don't want to give them full control, because then they become an admin equivalent for the whole file system. We still want to reserve some rights. This will let them do what they need to do. They can create things, delete things, write things, modify things. And then we click OK. I'm going to go to executive next. So I'm going to go to properties and then security. I'm going to edit my access control list, and I'm going to click add to add my executive group, or executive users group. And then also by clicking on modify on the bottom, it's going to give them the write rights as well. And I click OK. Now before I get any further, I'm already logged in as Robert, who should have access to the executive folder. Let's just try this. So I go back over to Windows 7. And I can see the accounting folder. If I click on it, I shouldn't have access to it, and I don't, which is exactly what I thought. So I gave the accounting people access to it, but I didn't give executive people, so Robert shouldn't have rights. So now under the executive folder, I do have rights. I can access it. Well, just because I access it doesn't mean I can create and delete things, so let's try things. So I'm going to make a new text document, and I'll just call it test.text. And there's my test document. If I so I can create things. Let me open it up, see if I can type some letters in there. I'm going to try to save it. It allows me to save it. It kept the changes. Let me see if I can rename it to sample. That seems to work. And I can also try deleting it, and I can delete it. So I can do all things at the file level. Let's see if these transfer down to the folders. So I create a new folder, a sample folder. I can create a folder. I can go into that folder. I can create a file in that folder. Go back to executive. Let's see if I can delete it, and everything that's in it, I can. So Robert has all the rights that he should in executive, and doesn't have it in accounting, which I set up other rights. So to continue on, we're going to use the same procedures for sales, operations, IS, and HR. For sales, I go to properties and go to security. I'm going to edit the access control list. And since I'm in the sales folder, I want to add the sales users group. So sales users. And I click OK. And I make sure I add the modify. If you missed that, the users will be able to see stuff, but they can't write or delete things. And you click OK and OK. Operations, the same thing. Right click operations, properties, security, edit, add. Let me okay, let's try this. And okay, little glitch there. So I'm in operations, so let me try to find my operations group, operations users group. Click OK, OK. Make sure you click modify. Click OK. And OK. IS should be my IS users. And HR should be my HR users. So I've created all my directories. I've given all the proper departments access to their department folders. Let's just check this out to see how this works. So I'm logged in as Robert. Let me try HR. I shouldn't be able to access anything else, and it doesn't appear that I can. So let's log as a different user then. We have Sarah over in operations. So let's log in as Sarah. Let me just double check that I have all the right people in the right places. So operations, I don't have Sarah. Where'd Sarah go? I don't know. Well, we'll choose Joshua in sales then. I'll have to put Sarah. Okay, so I'm going to use Joshua instead. So I'm going to click on my start button, and by shutdown, I'm just not going to do shutdown. I'm going to do a log off instead. So I'm logging off as Robert, and I will log in as Joshua, who, okay, so I'm going to log in as Joshua. So I'm going to switch users, other user, clicking in Joshua, my password. It's going to create a profile the first time. That's okay about the VMware interface. The next time you log in, it will be fine. So just click cancel there. If I go to my Windows Explorer, I can go to network. It doesn't ask me for the sharing part because it's per computer. So just the first time is turned on. The administrator actually turns it on. The user doesn't turn it on. I have access to my 2012 server. I double click on 2012. I have my data share. And here's all my directories. So I'm Joshua right now, so let me just double click on accounting. I don't have access. Executive folder, I don't have access. I go down to sales, and I do have access, which is exactly what I would have expected. So if I right click, click new folder, here's a new sample folder. Let me create a new text document, a sample text document, edit some text in the sample document. I can do all that. Let's see if I can delete. I can delete files and folders, so I have everything that I should have at that level. So that's how you can do that. We're going to create one more folder because right now if I look as Joshua, I can only have access to the sales folder. What if there's something that I want to do in conjunction with the accounting department or the human resource department? I have no place to actually put that. So I'm going to just create a shared folder. So I need to switch back to my server because Joshua can't create folders here. So as the administrator on the server, I'm going to go to my file manager and I'm going to make a new folder called shared. And for that shared directory, I'm going to give all the users the access to it. So I'm going to click on edit for the access control list, click on edit, add, and there's a couple different ways of doing this. I'm just going to choose users, the users group, and then give them modify right as well, so they have rights, right, and I click OK. Let's log back in as Joshua. I'm sorry, switch back over to Joshua. So now Joshua doesn't have access to the executive folder, but I do have access to the shared folder. So if I had something that I wanted to give, give to executive people, I put it in shared. I'm going to log off. I'm going to log back in as Robert, who is an executive. I want to share the network. Oh, there we go. Whew. Go to data. I don't have access to the shared area. I can't do that, but I can go to the shared area, grab these files, cut them, go back to executive, which I do have rights. and paste it there, and now that's a way of transferring stuff. Not the most secure. While it's sitting out and shared, anybody would have access to it, but if you're copying files quickly, it's a, you know, you're not going to send super secure stuff that way. You'd have your network administrator set up a share that both of you would have access to, but if you just want to copy a file very quickly, and it's just a really good common ground to do that. Any questions or comments up to this point? Okay. So now we've given basic rights for each department. We want to be able to show how we can limit the rights where and when we want to. Such an example of having a manager's folder within a department. So let's just start with, well, we're working with sales and executive. So I can sort of play with those. If I go to sales, oh, I'm on the client. I want to switch to my server. You have to log back in. And in our sales, you know, the salespeople can have anything they want. I can have a new folder, maybe called sales contacts. Maybe another folder. If they're in sales, maybe product lists. But there might be a special folder just for managers. Manager. That only the manager should have access to. Maybe there's some personnel stuff, or I don't know. Managers just have their own stuff to take care of. So if I'm logged in as a normal salesperson, and maybe I should even look at a normal salesperson, would be an example of Jacob should be a normal salesperson. I always have to go back and double check that I have these right though. So if I look at our sales users, members, I messed Jacob too. Okay, and I should have the rest of the people in there as well, but I'll just make sure I'm playing with Jacob and Joshua. So I'm going to log in as Jacob on my Windows 7 computer. So I'm going to log out as Joshua. Go ahead and log in. Switch users, other user, and I'm going to go log in as Jacob. Enter my password. Let it create its profile. I'll come back to this later. I'll hit cancel. Click on my file manager. Go to network. On my server 2012, and on my data drive. So if I click under sales, I should see everything underneath sales. And ideally, I want this to go away. And even later on, I'm going to talk about this shortly. I'm going to want all these things to go away. I only want to be able to see things I should have access to. But that'll, as we talk about like the sales manager folder, we'll get into that. Okay, so for the sales manager, I need to do something differently. So by default, whenever you give rights to something in the directory tree, it's going to flow on down. It's going to be inherited. So if you put it in a folder, it's going to keep going all the way down for all the subfolders. So you could create 100 subfolders, and they're going to have all the same rights at that level. You can, at different levels, block those rights. And so let's take a look at the manager level. The manager folder, if I right-click on the manager folder, I can go to Properties. If I go to Security, now this would be an advanced feature, so when I click on an advanced, and I have the option to disable the inheritance. Normally, all those rights, the sales users would have what says modify, but it's modified read, write, and read and write. So modify gives you that top level. I can disable that inheritance, so I don't want to inherit it from the sales folder. Unfortunately, you just can't click on one item and say disable that inheritance. When you click disable inheritance, it disables everything. and you see all the things that are being inherited right now, and some things we do need to keep inherited, such as the administrator. You know, if we disabled all inheritance, then the administrator won't have any more rights. And then there are some specific situations for the creator and system. So we do want to disable the inheritance, but we don't want to just remove it completely. What we want to do is convert it to an explicit permission. So think of it as I'm not allowing any inheritance, but anything that I would have inherited, I'm creating as a new access control list at this folder level. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click Advanced. I'm going to disable the inheritance. And I'm going to convert the inherited permissions to explicit. So I'm going to create a new, brand new list starting at this level flowing on down. And so now nothing's inherited, but I still have all the same rights. But because of that, and I can click OK. I can work in here, or I can work in the other part right now. And I like working up here. The sales users have read, write, modify. Well, everything else I want to keep the same. I just don't want all the users to be able to do that. So I'm going to remove the sales users from this access list. And now nobody in sales is going to have access to it. So I need to add back the sales manager. So I'm going to add back the sales manager and then give him, in this case, the modify rights, which also gives them the write rights. So again, I'm disabling the inheritance. I'm rewriting the inherited rights as explicit rights. And now once I have explicit rights, I can go in here, remove the users from those newly created explicit rights, and add back managers. So what's that going to look like for these people? So I'm going to click Apply and then click OK and OK. So I'm Jacob right now. So I should only be able to access the sales folder, well, sales and shared, which I can. Good, I can get into shared. I can't get into operations, but I can get into sales. I should be able to get into product lists. I should be able to get into contacts, but I shouldn't have access to managers. And that's exactly what's happening. I don't want to be able to have access to that. And I probably should have brought this up earlier, but that's really gets confusing. If people see directories, they want to try to get into them. And they'll be clicking, you know, it's like, oh, I can't access that, can't access that. We want to hide those from being viewed, and that is done through the share itself. You don't do it at the file system level, you do it at the share. And there's multiple ways of doing lots of things in Windows. This is not one of them. You do need to do this one specific way, and you need to be in Server Manager to do it. Once you're in Server Manager, you click on the left-hand side, you go to File and Storage Services. And when you click on File and Storage Services, you have the File and Storage Services. And I click on Shares. And this should show you all of your shares that you had. If we added them for all the different departments, they'd show up there as well. To make it so that you're only seeing the things you should be seeing or have rights to see, you go to the data share, because that's the share that we're dealing with, and I right click on it and I go to properties. So I right click on properties, and there's lots of things here, general, permissions, and settings, and there's different things underneath each of these. We're interested in settings. The settings option, the very first one is called access based enumeration. That displays only the files and folders that a user has permission to have access, to. If a user does not have at least read rights, then it hides the folder from the user's view, which is exactly what we want. So we want to enable this. Now underneath here is the OK. Be careful so you don't just close the window. You have to maybe bring this dialog box up so you can click OK. Now, because I've enabled access-based enumeration, if I click back on my Windows client and I refresh the screen, all those other Windows folders go away. I can only see sales and shared. Going into sales, oh, I can still see managers, and I should not be able to see managers. That's not good. I am missing something. I guess I just had to refresh it a couple more times. It gets me all nervous when those things don't work out immediately. I expect it to happen right away, and it doesn't always do that. So, good. Managers is gone, which is exactly what I'd expect it to be gone. Going in down, if I want to log out, so this is Jacob. Jacob is a normal salesperson. I can see my product list, sales stuff, but I don't see the managers folder. Let's log in as the sales manager. So I'm going to log off as Jacob, and I'm going to log in, switch user to Joshua. And click on my folder and network. So I'm Joshua. So under data, I should see sales, and I should also see the managers folder. We want to give rights to groups, not to individual people. An example would be I can go now to Server Manager. I can go to Users and Computers. And under Sales, say that Joshua, I don't know. Well, actually, go to Jacob. So Jacob, you know, Joshua's just completely swamped, and so Jacob is going to help out. Jacob's going to help out with some management stuff. So I can just take Jacob, and I can add him to the group. And if I put him into the Sales Manager group, that's all I have to do is put him in the Sales Manager group. And I guess I should have switched it the other way around, but okay, clicking on Start, log off. Let's log back in as Jacob. There's a big sales promotion, so Jacob's helping out. I click on Network. 2012 data, sales, and so now I can also get into, you know, the managers folder. So maybe some special promotional event that he's working on. Once we're all done with that promotional event, possibly I can go to Jacob and say, yeah, I don't need you to help out with the manager stuff anymore. So I can click on the sales manager and remove him from the group. I don't have to do anything with his rights and know what's linked to where or whatever. I just put them in the group, take them out of the group, and they should have the access. Now this might take a minute to refresh. Or I can, to speed things up, let me just log off and log back on. I'm so impatient. And now Jacob doesn't have access to that folder anymore. We're going to do another example, just like we did in sales, we did a manager. Since we've been playing with the president and Robert, actually we've been playing with Robert, the assistant, we're going to do the same thing with disabling inheritance on all of these. So I'll give you a chance to work on all of these. I'll go through another example, though, of going with the executive department. So the executive office, here's that executive file I copied before. But I'm going to make a new special folder called President. And the president, only the president should have access to the president. I know the assistant is right there and whatever, and probably the assistant would have access to this as well, but just go with the example. So the president, we don't want Robert to have access to. So let me log in as Robert on my Windows 7 computer. I've already logged in with him before, so he should log in pretty quickly. Oop. And I go to network, my server, my data, and then under executive I can see the president folder. And I can make a new text document that says give my assistant a big raise. And maybe you don't want the assistant to be able to do that in the president's folder. So we want to restrict the rights to just being to the president. So this is the same thing as a sales manager or an operations manager. It's just a different name for the folder. Now when I'm working with the rights on this, I'm going to be on my server. I'm going to right click, and so any rights that were given at the executive level, so the executive users were given the modified read and write rights to the executive folder, which means it flows on down. It's inherited to all the subfolders. We want to block the inheritance, so I right click on the president and click on properties, and then I go to security. So all this is done under the security tab. Normally we work with just this top part of our access control list, but in this case we're working with blocking inheritance, which is an advanced feature. So we have to click advanced, and we disable the inheritance. Right now, these are rights that are being inherited. Nothing is being given. Nobody has any specific rights, or they call it explicit. Nobody has explicit rights to the president folder at this point. Any rights that anybody has at this folder right now is because they're in a subfolder. You inherited them from somebody else. So we're going to change all that, and we're going to get rid of all this inheritance, but keep the list, because the list is important. So we're going to disable the inheritance, but keep the list, and we're going to convert it all into explicit permissions. So before, these were all inherited, and now they're not inherited. These are explicitly given at this level. And I can do it from here, so now I can start playing with the access control list as well. So now what do I want to change? So administrators, executive users still have the read, write, and modified rights. Well, we don't want the rest of the executive staff to have access to this folder, so I can remove this. So I'm removing the executive users, but now nobody has any rights. So I need to add back, and this, I'm going to show this screen to you because you may want to go this way. I want to select a principal. That means who. So I want to do the president. So I want to add the president back in, and then give the president modify and write rights. And I could have done the exact same thing up here by choosing president, by choosing edit. I could have added president and then give them the same rights. So it's just a different screen. That's why I prefer to come back to this one, because I'm more familiar with it. I use it more often, but you can do it in the other advanced screen as well. So now the inherited rights that I normally would have inherited from the executive department are no longer there, but I give the president to it. So now I'm Robert. So theoretically, I shouldn't have access to the president folder anymore, and I do. I'm the administrator on the server. I need to switch to Robert. They all look the same. Okay, if I hit F5, it refreshes and the president folder goes away. So I can't even see it, which is that access-based enumeration taking in effect. So I can't do anything there. So let's make sure it does work for the president, though. So let me log off as Robert and log in as our fearless leader, Madison. That was a new user for this computer, so I made a new profile. That's why it took a little bit longer. I click under network. I go to my server. I go to my data. I click under executive. I see the normal executive folders, and because I am the president, I now have access to my special folder. most of the time, and even my server has mistakes on it, and that's why I like to go back and check it before I try to show you. The most common things that go wrong with, like, say Robert can't access anything. Two things normally are the case. One is on the server, did I in fact give the group the rights, the right group, the right rights? They say, yeah, I definitely did that. Well, then the other case usually is, and this is where I've been, you know, like even right here, I didn't have Jacob part of the sales users. In fact, I don't have anybody part of the sales users. Making sure that you're the right people in the right group. So if under executive users and looking at members, make sure you actually have Robert and Madison in there. And it's easy to miss those things. You know, whether we're embedding groups within groups or whether we're putting all the users explicitly in a group, you have to ultimately figure out, is that person in the group that they're supposed to be in? And it's easy to do. It's so easy to miss something. And that is why you need to go back and test nearly every user. Now, I'm not going to test, you know, if I have a company of 500 people, no. But if I have 500 people in 6 different departments, I'm taking like 3 or 4 people in each department and logging in as them and trying them to make sure that those are right. Do they have rights to the stuff they should have rights? And do they have too many rights because I gave some other group something else someplace else? So making sure that everybody's in the right groups and have all the right security. You got to be testing those. You can't just implement security and say, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'm confident in my work, and then log in and it doesn't work and you're trying to figure out why. But those are the most common reasons. You go ahead and do the rest of the departments. I believe that most of you have done last week already. If you're not, this is a good time to practice and review. I'm going to keep doing them. Just kind of drown me out if you're not wanting to listen. But, you know, I'm going to do a couple more departments here. So for accounting, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. So for accounting, I'm going to make a new manager folder. And just for that manager folder, I'm going to the properties of the manager folder and then go to security. Clicking advanced, disabling the inheritance, converting them to explicit permissions, and then I'm going to click OK. I really do prefer this screen. I want to edit this here, and I'm going to get rid of all the users. I don't want all the users, all the accounting users to have access, but I do want to make sure that the accounting manager has rights. So I choose my group called accounting manager. And make sure that you give them the proper rights. That's another thing you should do. Even if you can log in successfully and see all the right folders, make sure you can create things and delete them. They're different rights, so you could find yourself, oh yeah, I can see everything just fine. You go to edit something and you can't, or you go to delete something or you can't, or you want to make a new folder and you can't. So you kind of have to try all those different scenarios with different people in different departments. And that should be it for the accounting. I'm going to go through and make the rest, and then I'll come back and test them individually. Under HR, I'm going to make a new folder called Manager. Security, Advanced, disable the inheritance, convert it to explicit permissions. OK. Edit, remove the HR users, add the HR manager, and give the manager the modify and write rights. Yes. Properties, security, advanced, disable the inheritance, convert to explicit permissions, click OK. Edit the access control list, remove the IS users, and add the IS manager, and giving them modify and write rights. Operations. Make an operations manager folder. right-click, Properties, Security, Advanced, disable the inheritance, convert them to explicit permissions, click OK, edit the access control list, remove the operations users, add the ops manager, and give the manager modify and write rights. Sales I already did, and shared. Actually, we're going to do one under shared as well. Under shared, I'm going to make a new folder, also called managers. I'm going to do the same thing. Right now, everyone has access to managers, the entire company, but I only want that special managers group to have it, not any individual one, but that whole managers group, which is a group of the managers. So properties, security, advanced, block the inheritance, change them to explicit, click OK, edit the list. Now here you're going to see users instead of like the HR users or IS users. This is going to be all GOPA users. I'm going to remove them, and I should have, I did not check, a managers group. And I just want to, hopefully I have all the right people in the managers group. And give them modify rights and then click OK. So for each of these departments, you should, and including shared, you should have a manager folder. We're just renaming the manager and under executive to be president, but it's the exact same concept. Then we disable the inheritance. We remove all the users from having access to it, and we give just the manager the rights to there. The next couple examples that I have in the learning plan are just a modified approach of what we've done already. What we've done so far is everybody has inheritance. It flows on down. We stop that inheritance. We block all those rights. And then we give somebody else access, usually a smaller subset, to have access to those, to a special folder and the folders below that. We're going to modify that a little bit. We're going to still block the inheritance, but allow some of the rights to flow through, not all of them, and then still give somebody else control. So for the example, a policies folder. So we're going to create a policies folder within the shared folder. All the people should be able to read the policies, but only the HR staff can update them. So we already have a folder in our shared folder. Have to log back in. That's my so I already have a folder under my shared folder called managers, and if I'm not a manager, I can't see this at all. So there's nobody that has any access to this except if you're in that managers group. We're gonna do a little bit different. We're gonna make a new folder under our shared folder called policies. And right now, since everyone has rights to the shared folder, all the rights to the shared folder, that would be inherited to the policies as well. So anybody could create policies, delete policies, modify policies, and we don't want to do that at the corporate level. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go to the properties and then security for the policies folder. And we're going to go down to advanced. And we're going to disable the inheritance. So we still have to disable the inheritance. We're just going to control it differently afterwards. So we're going to convert it to explicit permissions. And then we click OK. So this has been identical so far that we've done everything the same. The difference is when I go back to edit this access control list, I don't want to remove the users. I want to modify their rights. So above here, they're given the read, write, and modified rights. But starting from here going on down, I want to get rid of the modify and write rights. I only want to give them the read and list folder contents rights. So they can read the policies but not change them, at least theoretically. We'll test that out. And also, I need to have the second part of the activity. It says allow the staff, HR staff, to update the policies. So I need to add another person, another group, another entry to the access control list, and I want to find my HR users. Now, the debate as far as, well, shouldn't you just have the managers do that? I don't care. I mean, we're just choosing another group that's going to have access to it. So it's purely philosophical. We're not getting to that level. If you say only the HR manager should come up with corporate policy, that's perfectly fine. If it's a department and they truly work together, and some people are in charge of the health policies or the safety policies or the attendance policies or whatever. So I don't want to get into details as far as why I chose that. It's completely arbitrary, but I did. So, and now once I have the HR users selected, I want to give them modify rights, which then gives them the write rights. So users should be able to read the files. HR people should be able to modify and write the files. At least theoretically. Let's give it a shot and see how it works. The first thing I need to do, I probably need to fix some of my, I think I had some issues. HR member, oh, Alexis, that's good. So Alexis is a user and she's an HR manager, and that should be all I really need to worry about. So I'm going to switch over to my Windows 7 computer, and I am Madison at the point. So I'm the company president. And you're saying, well, why don't you give the president rights to change policies? And yeah, you could. And again, I don't want to get into like why you should or shouldn't, but it's just an example. So if I click on my data and I click under shared, I should see the policies. Oh, I should see managers as well. I probably messed up something for Madison. Anyway, but at least I can see the policies folder. And just to make it a little bit more realistic, I'm going to switch back to my server. And I'll put a policy in the policy folder. New text document. Dress code. And new policy, I don't know. Attendance. I can't spell attendance. There we go. Attendance. Okay. Just to make it a little bit more realistic. Okay. So I'm the president and I go to shared and I can, obviously create anything I want in the shared. If I go to policies, I can see my dress code. I can double click on it and I should be able to read the policy. Now, I guess I should make it even a little bit more realistic. You have to come to work. Okay, dress code. You have to wear clothes. Okay, now let's switch back. Okay, so now I'm the president. I can click on the dress code. I can see the dress code. What I shouldn't be able to do is I shouldn't be able to delete the dress code. If I try to delete it, I get the error saying I can't do it. I shouldn't be able to change the dress code either. If I try to save this, it brings up the save as dialog box, so I can't save in the same location. And if I make it dress code 2, I still can't save it to that folder at all. I don't have any permissions, so I can't change the dress code. I can't delete them. Cancel. No, I don't want to save. I can't make new policies, new text document. I just can't do that. And again, maybe you'll want to have the president be able to do this, and you can add them to the group, but just showing you the example. Now, let's log in as Alexis. So if I have my rights right, I'm going to log off of my computer, and I'm going to log in as Alexis or any other HR staff member. And it wants to do that, whatever, which is fine. I go find my share. Shared, here's the policies folder. And here's the attendance policy. And it's like, oh, maybe a little bit more detail on there. From 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. And now I should be able to save this. And I can. I just did. I can add new policies in here. Or old policies folder. I don't know. Whatever we're going to do. So as an HR person, I can do anything in there. And meanwhile, you know, any person can... Anybody else... Let's log in as Jacob. Under shared on my policies folder, and I can see all these policies, but I can't do anything with them. So I can see the dress code, I can see the attendance policy and whatever. So that's the idea of that one. We're going to do the exact same thing. We're actually going to I should switch those two lines around. We're going to do the exact same thing in just the operations department. So, switching back to my server, I can do the exact same thing again, just as another practice. Under operations, in my operations folder, I have the manager folder, but I also want to make, you know, with operations, there's a ton of procedures. And, you know, I mean, I don't want each department to do their own thing. I want to essentially control this. Maybe I'm even regulated by the government or some kind of like OSHA or whatever. And so I have to have these policies and procedures, I should say. Now, because I don't want people to modify them or delete them by mistake, I want to control this or secure this folder. And I'm doing this exactly the same way as I did for the policies in the shared folder. So I'm going to right-click on the procedures directory. Go to Properties, and go up to Security again, and then click on Advanced, because I want to block the inheritance, because otherwise all the operations people would have modified read and write rights, and I don't want them to. So I'm going to disable the inheritance, but I'm going to convert them to explicit permissions, and then I click OK. Now I'm going to edit this access control list, once again, by not deleting the operation users. They still have to read the procedures. All I'm going to do is modify their rights. So I'm not going to delete them, I'm going to modify them. So I'm going to get rid of modify and write, so they'll only be able to read the files and then list the folder contents that lets you browse through them. But that means that I, as administrator, would have to actually create and update all the procedures. I don't want to do that. That's the operations manager's job. So I'm going to click on Add, and I'm going to find the operations manager. And I'm going to give him or her modify, and then by extension, the write rights. And then I click OK. Now, sorry for the sidetrack again. Ops manager is completely missing. I should be more careful on this. Oh, this is where Sarah was supposed to be. Not sure how I lost Sarah. So, add to group. She'll be part of both the ops users and ops managers. I thought I could choose both. Yeah, I thought I could. There we go. So I'm going to add her to both of those. And let's see. I don't have any other operations people. John is a operations person in. Well, actually, Abigail. I'm going to do Abigail because she's in first shift. Abigail. And I'm going to add Abigail to the ops users. Okay, so if I did all that correctly, let me switch back to Windows 7. Right now I'm logged in as Jacob. Jacob is in sales. So I don't see operations at all, which is great. I shouldn't see operations at all. So let's log in as an operations person. Let me back. I'll log in as the manager, Sarah. So she can start putting some procedures in there. So I'm going to log off as Jacob. And I'm going to log in as Sarah. Uh-oh. What? Operations. Sarah. How could I have typed her password wrong twice? Go figure. It's going to make a new desktop profile for her, so it'll just take a second. Clicking cancel on there, going to Windows Explorer, Network, 2012, Data. Okay, so I'm in Operations, so I see my Ops directory and my Shared directory, which I should expect. I click on Shared, and I see my Policies folder, and I should see Managers because I'm a manager, so obviously I have something else goofed up. So kind of ignore that part. If I go to Operations, I am a manager, so I can get in the Managers directory, and I can get into Procedures. So being the manager, I should be able to start writing some procedures. Oh, I don't make a new folder. I want to make a new document. New text document. I don't know. How to nail in a nail. Step 1. Take hammer and hit nail. Step 2. Repeat until nail is all the way in. I'll go ahead and save that. So now I've created a procedure. Let's see if the procedures are accessible to the people who need the procedures. So we're going to go and log in as Abigail now. Is this fun logging in as all these people? So I'm going to log off as Sarah, and I'm going to log in as Abigail. Switch user, Abigail. Cancel that. Windows Explorer, Network. So I'm Abigail, a first shift worker, trying to figure out how to nail that nail in. So I go to Operations, I look under the Procedures directory, and I say, oh, that's how I do that, and I'm able to read it. I say, I'm going to make my own procedures, and I can't. I don't like that nailing procedure, so I'm going to remove that one. I can't. So Sarah can put stuff in there, but everybody else in Operations can everybody else is just going to be able to view it. So there was one other activity I was going to do as far as drive mappings. I'll just demonstrate this to you, but I'll see if you have any questions first. Okay, so right now it's a really big pain. So here I am, I'm Abigail, having to go to, you know, my files here, and I click on my computer on my local C drive, I'm really tempted to save my files there because that's my local computer. I don't think of going to my network, double clicking on, you know, this 2012-1, whatever that is, and then I don't know where to go from here. Maybe data. Oh yeah, there's my files. That's a lot of work to do, and users don't like doing work. So there is a way of, right from the network level, I'm sorry, under the computer level, sorry, you have to switch it back to computers. You have this option here. It says map a network drive. And a map a network drive is a local user profile piece. It's not based on the computer. It's not based on, well, it is based on the user, but locally. So it's only going to be on this physical computer with this person. Who am I again? Abigail, with Abigail logged in. But I can map a network drive. And so I can take, you know what? I want my letter, I don't even know what drive letters I have available. Let me double check. I can't use D, unfortunately. So I'll have to use like E. So you want to use a drive letter like E. And then I want to point to something. So, and the example is / server / share. And I could type that in, and that's called the UNC, the Universal Naming Convention. I go / 2012-1 is the server name, and the share is called data. Now that's typing. That means that you have to memorize that and make sure that you don't type data with a date. So you can also browse. So you could actually, you know, skip that part. And it's usually not this bad. Come on, come back. Oh, come on. So when you browse, you can get your list of your network shares. So I can click on the little arrow thing there, and I can see my shares. I'm going to click on my data share. Now I could go to a specific folder. Not a good idea. It's usually good to go to the root of the share because you have access to everything that you want, but you could. And then you can click OK. And so that's what's mapped to. If you notice, that's the exact same thing I typed, but without typing it. You also have an option of reconnecting at logon. That means that every time Abigail logs in, that is going to get mapped. That's what you want. So I'm going to click Finish on here. And now I have an E drive that's going to there. So if I click on my Windows Explorer and I click on Computer, I now have an E drive. Now it's still kind of off from the rest, but it is an E drive. And if I'm going to work on something, you know, like Notepad, because that's my word processor of choice, I go to File, you know, Save As. I can click on Computer, and I have an E drive to it. And people are more familiar with E drive, D drive, C drive than they are / server 2012-1 / data / ops / procedures, whatever. And now, you know, being in Notepad, I can go to, now let's see, I'm Abigail. So, but I can go to the ops folder and save it right in the ops folder. My products. And I'm able to write in there, and I can just do a file, save it again. And to a user, they really can't tell the difference of where that is. So it still does look a little bit different. If I can do a file open, I'm in my ops directory already, so I can look under procedures, so I can actually open up how to nail in my nail. And work that way. So let me log off. I'm going to log off as Abigail. I'm going to log back in as Abigail. And if all my settings went correctly, I should still have my E drive, which I do. Again, this only applies to this one person. I'm going to log off and log in as Sarah. Switch user. other user. I click on my Windows Explorer. I have no such E drive. So it's cool, it's neat, it's definitely beneficial for those people that have the consistent computer and they're always going to the same places all the time. Definitely not very useful. You have to tell every user in your company to know how to do this and then have them do it on every computer that they ever go to. Some people are going to be choosing their E drive, some people are choosing, oh, I kind of like Z, that's kind of a fun drive to choose. Well, my name's Tom, so I can use a T drive. And so now you can have all these different drive letters. And you're going to say, hey, make sure you're saving it to your T drive. And the next person says, I have no idea what you're talking about. I have an E drive and no T drive. And it's just chaotic trying to manage all that. So, but we can deal with that with something called group policy objects, which we'll get to next week. So. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. So that gives you about an hour to play, practice, review, wipe everything out, and rebuild it again. The more you work with the rights and the more you actually get in that property screen for security, and just kind of repeating it over and over, it's going to get you where you want to be. Definitely test your accounts. I've noticed several people on my system already that obviously I'm not completed on, and I apologize for not having the complete example. Like Sarah, the sales manager, should in the shared folder have access to the managers folder. So and Madison wasn't there either, so I must be missing something with my managers. So I just threw that together quickly. Questions or comments? Okay, the rest of the day is yours to practice.